What is going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back with another live stream for you guys. Spurs are making moves in this transfer window, and the window ain't even open. I have never seen Spurs move so quickly. Maybe when when the Lewis family said, actions speak louder than words, maybe they meant it, because there's been moves already in this transfer window. 2 free transfers, Robertson, Senesi, they're all but wrapped up officially. You've got Savinho coming through the door from Man City in a pretty big deal, about 45 million. And now the latest one on the rank is Jan-Paul van Hecke. There seems to be a lot of movement. Big up to everyone in the chat. 360 of you so far. But there's more to talk about today. Not just Jan-Paul van Hecke. There's other names being put into the ether, into the zeitgeist, that are linked with Tottenham Hotspur this window. Sim, are we going to a back five? We are going to talk about everything. What does Jan-Paul van Hecke's move mean for Romero, Vuskovic, maybe even a doggy? We're going to talk about all of that on today's stream. We're going to be reacting to a lot of what has been said about Van Hecke on X. There's why we've been signing him. People are excited. Brighton fans confused. All that kind of stuff. There's a few more stories, transfer stories as well, we're going to get into. None have officially signed yet, Sim. You're right. And it's classic Tottenham fashion, classic Spurs fan in all of us that gets ahead of ourselves and declares early victory before the win is in our hands, within our grasp. It's very Spursy of us. Until we're holding up the shirt, there is nothing to celebrate. And talking of shirts, why don't you go and check out OK Jersey? OK Jersey, if you use our code SPURS15, you get 15% off all their kits on their website. They do phenomenal job with their replica shirts on OK Jersey. Super high quality, really affordable prices. You can get the current Tottenham shirts, you get retro Tottenham shirts, all replica shirts. You can get replica shirts for all 48 nations who are participating in the World Cup, with the World Cup just around the corner. If you order today, you can get your jerseys in time for the World Cup coming up. You have 15% off if you use our code. It's already affordable, but it's even cheaper if you use our code SPURS15 to get 15% off. No code is a higher discount than the code on screen right now, SPURS15. We've been using OK Jersey for the past few weeks, and I have to say we've been ordering jerseys to our house, and we've been very, very impressed with how high quality. You would not be able to tell they're replicas. They're phenomenal quality, really, really impressive. Go to okjersey.com, check them out for yourself. Use our code SPURS15, you get 15% off. They've got an array of merchandise on their website, jackets, hoodies, loads of shirts, all the shirts you can ask for from any club, any nation. So go and check out for yourself, okjersey.com, and go get yourselves one today. Spurs, Sim is auditioning. Yeah, Ben ain't here today. He has other commitments he has to attend to. So you're going to be dealing with me. Maybe a late cameo. We'll see how we get on, but there may be a late cameo from Brian as the stream goes on. But it is just going to be me for now. And let's start with an update with all today's transfer news. We did wake all of us woke up to a bomber today from David Ornstein about Jan-Paul van Hecke. I'll go through some of the other stories and that was broken, and then we'll talk about a little update to just since the early updates from David Ornstein from SZY. So let's go talk about Jan-Paul van Hecke. Yeah, there you go. So we know David Ornstein earlier today says Spurs have submitted a bid to sign Jan-Paul van Hecke from Brighton. The bid has been rejected, as per David Ornstein. Sam Wallace says the initial bid has been rejected. The Brighton value him at around 70 million, and he's entering the final year of his deal. The initial Spurs had their initial bid rejected. And also there is interest from Chelsea and Liverpool, which is obviously got to be a bit of a worry. Both looking for centre backs, both maybe could obviously rival or even beat us when it comes to wages. Both historically, especially in recent seasons, a lot more successful than us. And also, you've got to say, when it comes to Chelsea and Liverpool, maybe it's easier to get into the team right now when we've still got Romero and Van der Ven at the helm. Romero obviously expected to leave. We'll talk about it in a bit. Vuskovic as well as an option for us. So could you say Van Hecke might find it easier to get in at Liverpool and Chelsea, where they're desperate for first-choice centre-backs right now, whereas right now, as things stand, we have them at our club. So that's obviously a conversation. We also heard from a Dutch journalist, Joost Blauhoff, who says Spurs have made concrete attempts to sign Jan-Paul Van Hecke. According to sources, the bid is significant enough for the two clubs to have entered negotiations in an effort to reach an agreement. This was all earlier today, so that was obviously a lot of reliable sources suggesting this Jan-Paul Van Hecke transfer is hotting up. And that Dutch journalist also said the deal is likely to happen before the World Cup, which that was pricked a lot of people's ears. Okay, wow, Spurs moving very quickly. Now there has been another update. This is from SZY and ITK on X. He's claiming Brighton's valuation of Jan-Paul Van Hecke is 50 million with 1 year left on his deal. Unaware of the exact number, but told that the fee bidded was just below that valuation. As reported in April, players have always been keen on a move to Tottenham. All parties believe a deal will be struck. And he says Van Hecke has been of interest since last summer. We have heard Van Hecke has been linked with Tottenham for a long, long time. Many, many windows Tottenham have been interested. But now Roberto De Zerbi's at the helm. Roberto De Zerbi obviously managed him at Brighton when he was in charge there. Now he's at the helm at Tottenham. People have put two and two together and suggested clearly he's going to want him. Now, Van Hecke's, I feel like, really grown as a centre-back ever since De Zerbi's even left, because I think when he was there, De Zerbi, he was not quite the player he is now. I think he's had a lot of learning too. He still, makes mistakes. He's still not the perfect defender, but I think De Zerbi was the one who really saw the potential in him. I think he brought him to Brighton, and he's gone from strength to strength. And I really believe he's become one of the top centre-backs, outside of the top six for sure, the big six, but definitely in terms of on the ball, he is a phenomenal, phenomenal centre-back. The stats speak for themselves. We're going to go through the stats a bit later, but the stats speak for themselves. I was taking a very close eye watching him when we played them late in the season, because I knew we were linked with him, and I really wanted to say, okay, I'm just going to be a bit of a player cam. I'm going to really watch Van Hecke against us. And obviously we played quite well in that game, but I was taking special notice of Van Hecke because I knew Spurs would probably be interested in him in the summer. And I have to say, I was really, really impressed. His passing in between the lines was phenomenal. Spurs really struggled to deal with it. He was finding Brighton forwards constantly in the final third. It was very difficult for Tom to screen his passes. He was manipulating the angles extremely effectively, and his passes were not just aimless, like safe passes. They were tricky, line breaking passes in between the lines. And obviously we've had that with Romero over the years, but looking at Van Hecke doing that, and that gave me a lot of hope. If Romero leaves, this guy can really fill his shoes, and he's still quite young. I mean, he's not young, he's reaching peak age at 25, and I think De Zerbi is getting a better player than he managed when he was there, a player who's come on leaps and bounds. And I'm super excited about the prospect of Jan-Paul Van Hecke coming to Tottenham. Now, there are question marks about what that means for our defence. We're going to do a separate video about that. What does bringing Jan-Paul Van Hecke to Tottenham, if it does happen, mean for the likes of Romero, Vuskovic, maybe even Destiny Doggy? We're going to talk about all that after the update. But just on the face of it, for me, we've had conversations, me and Ben, over the summer about what I would like to see Tottenham do, kind of, if Romero was to go. I've always kind of angled towards, as much as I think Vuskovic is a top talent and I'm really excited about what he could offer, the reality is, how ready is he for Premier League football? If we're looking to really kick on from next season, not kick on, if we're really looking to banish what was a disaster last year in finishing 17 twice and get some real proven qualities of players who can shoot us up the league, and we're confident they can do that, players who De Zerbi trusts, we know can perform very well immediately at this in this league, then I think signing Jan-Paul van Hecke is going to accelerate that process a lot quicker than betting in Luka Vuskovic. Now, you could argue if you bet in Luka Vuskovic now, in long term, you could have a world-class centre-back in your team and you won't have to spend a penny. And that's not a bad kind of way of looking at things. But if we're ambitious about what we can achieve for next season in the short term, Jan-Paul van Hecke is probably the way to go. And then you have him, obviously, probably sell Romero. You have him, Senesi, and Van de Ven, and Danso. I mean, that's a hell of a centre-back option. Hell of a centre-back roster to choose from. And all of a sudden, that looks really, really ambitious going next season. You've got depth there in each position, Prem-proven, quality players. And at the end of the day, when it comes to Vuskovic, as much as I rate his talent, the guy is 19. He's got a lot of learning to do. He's played in a team like Hamburg, who, yes, are... it's impressive the way he's been performing for Hamburg, no doubt about it. And the way he's been... thrust into the centre of their defence, and it's been a massive reason why they've stayed in the league. But the reality is he's been playing in a low block kind of system where they defend a lot. Then he's not asked to cover large spaces. He's not played a high line. Van Hecke's used to playing that at Brighton under Zerbi, under Hertzler. He's used to it. So this is nothing new for Van Hecke. Same with Senesi. Same obviously with Van de Ven. So these players, they're coming into the Premier League knowing what the job requires. So for me, they're much more safer bets than thrusting Vuskovic as our starting centre-back from the beginning of the season. Now, don't get me wrong. If we do that with Vuskovic, there's no doubt in my mind that even if it takes some time to acclimatise, he would probably do it. But it might take a while. It might take months. It might even take a whole season. Do we have that time to wait? Do we have that patience, or is it worth doing what maybe Arsenal did with Saliba, put him on another loan until he's fully ready, maybe put him on a loan at a team in a top 5 league who do play a bit more offensively, who do play a bit more of a higher line. So that's kind of what I'm feeling with Vuskovic, but there's different questions. Look, this isn't about Vuskovic, this is about Jan-Paul van Hecke. I want to talk about that price tag. They're talking about SNY talking about 50 million euros. Now, some of the other reporters are suggesting the guy is rated 70 million. With 1 year left in his deal, no one's paying 70 million. So I think the price Brighton would be demanding is about 50 million, because he is a peak age starting centre-back who's been top of his game for a few years now. He's going to be starting probably at the Euros for the Dutch national team. So this is a top quality centre-back. It isn't cheap, but you got to remember, even in the last year of your contract, he's still got a lot of value. And Brighton know there's going to be interest from lots of different clubs. So for me, 50 million isn't a crazy ask, a demand from Brighton. It's a bit of an overpayment, but if Tottenham can get something off that, get it between 40, 45 million, get a bit of a drop in price, and then I think you pay the money. I think you pay the 45 million. I tell you why, because Chelsea and Liverpool are going to be breathing down our necks. We have to show that we are desperate for him. Not desperate, that's the wrong word. We really want him. He's our number one target. We have to show him that we value him really highly and we're prepared to bring him in, even if it means, just paying the asking price or paying near that. I think we've criticised Spurs for maybe botching deals previously, for not paying the extra few million that it would have taken to get a deal over the line, because it's maybe a bit over what we wanted to pay. And I think in this scenario, if he's demanding close to 50 million, there's a bit of negotiation. If we can get him down to 45, I think you pay the money. And I don't think that's a terrible deal, because I think you're paying to beat the competition. You're paying to get ahead of Chelsea and Liverpool. Yes, we could wait. We could say, no, you know what? We're going to wait till after the World Cup. We're going to wait to finish this deal because we believe maybe Brighton get more desperate and they lower their asking price, let it down the window. As the window gets closer to shutting and he's not signing a contract, maybe Brighton get a bit of twitchy fingers and they say, you know what, we're going to lower the asking price. But if you wait, you're risking Chelsea and Liverpool pouncing and maybe them paying the asking price, or maybe them having discussions with Van Hecke about convincing him to go there. So we've currently stolen a march on those teams. We've gotten in there early. We've started negotiations. We've shown Van Hecke, look, we really want you. We're willing to go now. We're willing to sign you up before the World Cup, even before we've sorted Romero's future, whatever. Doesn't matter. We're not concentrating on that. We're concentrating on you because we want you at this football club. De Zerbi really believes in you. He knows you well. So I think it's smart what we've done, and I think I think it's very crucial we do get this deal done now before the World Cup if that's what they're suggesting they want to do, because that is what big clubs do, or clubs in our position do, especially when you're hearing of interest from other teams who definitely should be interested in him. So I would pay the money. I don't think it's a terrible deal. 45 million for a player of his quality is smart business. If you think about it, there's no transfer fee for Senesi. So paying 45 million for Van Hecke and Senesi is phenomenal business. In other scenarios, in a different scenario, if Van Hecke had 2 years left on his deal and Senesi, let's say, even had 1 year left on his deal, you're talking about probably 80 million there for the pair, at least. You're probably looking at that. You're looking at probably 60 million or 70 million, as suggested, for Van Hecke, and you're looking at close to 100 million, because maybe even 30 million for Senesi with a year left. So to get those two for 45 million is phenomenal business if we can get Jan Paul Van Hecke over the line. So that is my take on Jan Paul Van Hecke. I'm going to have a different video after the update about what it means for all the different defenders and what the different permutations. But let's carry on with the update. Let's talk about Cuti Romero. So Cuti Romero, SZY has been talking about him as well. And he says about Cuti Romero is expected to move on. The move has been expected since January. Obviously, this is in light of the news of Jan Paul Van Hecke. The move advancing very quickly. No surprise to anyone that Romero is the one who's expected to depart and expected to move on to pastures new this summer. For me, I think it is a shame. I know a lot of people out there are not fussed and want him gone or are happy to see the back of him. I'm not kind of in that camp. I'd like to see him stay if circumstances were different. I think personally he's perfect for De Zerbi. I think he is one of the best ball-playing centre-backs there is. I know Van Hecke's great, but I think Romero's every bit as good, probably better, to be honest. And I think he's just a better player than Van Hecke. But there is no beating around the bush. There's no getting around that he's made way too many mistakes this season. His heart maybe isn't quite in it right now, judging from what we've seen of him this season. He does cause problems for the club. He does cause problems for the hierarchy, which I'm not bothered about. I don't mind him being uncomfortable for the hierarchy, but I understand the hierarchy. There's going to be a willingness for them to maybe want to sell Cuti Romero after this season. And if we can get a fee, this is a player, probably, look, if we're looking to recoup some money to fund part of the window, he's one of the ones you're probably looking at who you can get a good fee. There will be some interest in. So with the news of Van Hecke, it does make sense. Romero moves out, Van Hecke comes in, like for like, and then we all move on. We get some fresh blood with Van Hecke, someone who maybe wants to be here, wants to play under De Zerbi, is excited about being at Tottenham, sees Tottenham as a step up in his career and the next step, whereas Romero, he maybe sees Tottenham as someone holding him back and maybe a club where he could be doing better. Is that the case? I think under different circumstances, I think De Zerbi could convince Romero to stay. I think Romero would love playing under De Zerbi. I think Romero would be perfect for De Zerbi. I think De Zerbi would love someone of Romero's mentality at centre-back, and I think it could have been a match made in heaven. But unfortunately, sometimes in football, just timing is everything. And unfortunately, the timing of De Zerbi coming in, and I think our view is clouded a lot with his injury because he got injured in De Zerbi's first game. And if you cast your mind back to when De Zerbi came in, a lot of people were saying Van de Ven, not bothered if he goes, his mind's not in it, he's in a bad way. The difference with why people have flipped on Van de Ven and maybe not Romero is because Van de Ven showed under 7 games under De Zerbi that his attitude's completely flipped and what an amazing player we all know he is. But he showed under Zerbi what a brilliant that his mind is completely flipped, and he's now back and kind of. He's playing again, and he's playing back to the best of his ability. He believes in Roberto De Zerbi. He believes in the way De Zerbi wants to play, and he looks like full of belief again, whereas Romero got injured in De Zerbi's first game, a bad knee injury, and didn't play any of the 7 games. If Romero had played those 7 games and played as well as Van de Ven had, maybe we're having a different conversation here. Maybe we're talking about, or maybe the fans are talking about, look, we need to keep Romero. He's such a phenomenal player when his mind's in, all that kind of stuff. But because we never saw a change in Romero, because we never got to see him under De Zerbi, I think the narrative has not been there for Romero as it has been for Van de Ven. So I think at the end of the day, Romero probably looking like he wants to leave. He wants to maybe go have a spell in La Liga. I think the club want to sell him. It looks like we're going for Van Hecke. Makes sense for everyone that Romero parts ways. I'm not the one. I'm for one want him to stay if there's a possibility of it, which we'll go into. Could there be, which we'll talk about later. But I'm not stupid. I'm not naive. I think the likelihood is I think it's pretty certain now with the Van Hecke news he will be moving on, and it's about finding the right club for him, getting the right price, and reinvesting that money, which is likely to be pretty much going to pay for Van Hecke. So that is the news on Cuti Romero. Now we're going to talk about a report from Sky Sports. Not by Bruno, which we'll talk about Bruno in a second, but Sky Sports wrote a report saying Tottenham want to sign a central midfielder that can pass from deep. That is one of their main targets for the summer, which is music to all our ears. All Spurs fans know that that Spurs need a midfielder that can set the tempo of a game, that can kind of control a game with his passing ability. You know, when it needs to be slow, you keep the ball ticking, but when it needs to be sped up, you speed it up. And Tottenham just haven't had that player in the middle for many, many years. I think De Zerbi needs that player, in my opinion, at the helm. I think he just needs some technical ability. He needs some technical ability at the centre of his midfield. It's why I've been questioning about the signing of Paulinho and stuff like that. We already have so many midfielders. How are we going to sign Paulinho, keep Gallagher, keep Bentancur, keep Bergvall, keep Gray, while also maybe and even while let going Sarr, and you want a passing midfielder, and maybe even want Alex Scott or something else. All of a sudden, you're looking at maybe 6 or 7 midfielders. And it just looks a bit too much, which is why I would rather let go of Paulinho. But we all want a passing midfielder. We all want a midfielder with high technical ability. We've been talking about Alex Scott. We've been talking about Hen Hackney. We've been talking about Locatelli, potentially Adam Wharton. Now, there has been another name thrown into the mix today from SZY. He claims that Roberto De Zerbi has put forward Bruno Guimaraes as his dream target, but the deal would be tough to do. He said would be a very high fee, obviously, a lot of persuasion, I'd imagine, too. So Roberto De Zerbi sees Bruno Guimaraes as his dream target, according to SZY, for that midfield role. What a signing he would be for me. I think he is an absolute phenomenal player. I love him as a midfielder. I think he's really developed as a top number 6 at Newcastle. I think his passing game is brilliant. You know what? I have to say, whenever I watch Bruno, he never ever has a bad game. Even when Newcastle aren't playing at their best, he is usually a 7 or 8 out of 10 every single game. He is so press resistant. His passing ability is fantastic. He sets the tempo brilliantly, and he's a threat in the final third as well. But I think he's gone from a player when Newcastle signed him, maybe a bit of a number 8, maybe even a player you would thought, can he play further forward? And then you've got Tonali, Joelinton and Bruno in their midfield, which is a brilliant 3. And you're looking at that and you're thinking, is Tonali, should he be the one sits deeper? Is Joelinton, he's the one maybe a bit more defensive with, I know he started as a striker, but he's the one with his defensive attributes, which are top notch. But Bruno has been the one playing at the base of a midfield 3 there. It's just because his technical ability, his ability to sit deep and dictate the game is phenomenal. And I think he would be an absolutely astonishing signing if we were able to get that over the line. That would be a real statement of ambition, bringing someone like Bruno Guimaraes. Now, it's ambitious. It's unlikely. Could we convince him to leave Newcastle for us? I believe we probably could. Could we convince Newcastle to sell to us? Maybe, probably not. That's going to be the sticking point. Here's the reality. He is a player with 2 years left on his deal. So when a player starts running down his contract, if there's no sign of a contract being signed, does that mean Newcastle could potentially be open to offers? Maybe, but there'd have to be an astronomical fee to depart with probably their best player to a team they consider rivals. Newcastle aren't in Europe next season. So and Bruno Guimaraes has been there since I think January 22. So he's been there now for quite a few years. Could he be looking for a new challenge? Yes, but probably Bruno, that new challenge is one of the teams in the Champions League. Tottenham can't offer that this season. So that probably makes things very, very difficult for Spurs to convince him. If Tottenham were to go for him, would have to push the bat on massively, over 100 million. Over 100 million for a player who's going to be 29 in the next month or so. Is that smart business? I think maybe some analysts will say no. I would argue for that kind of player. I mean, 100 million for a 29-year-old is usually a bad piece of business, but someone like Bruno, who's that good, does have high availability usually and would really be a game changer. It's tempting not to push the boat out a bit, but it would have to be that kind of fee for a player who's got 2 years left on his deal. Would we be able to convince him over other clubs if, let's say, a Chelsea, a Liverpool, a City, Arsenal, any of these clubs, if they come in for him and they're in the race, all of a sudden becomes very, very difficult for Tottenham. If it's just Tottenham and Newcastle kind of battling it out, negotiating for him, could we strike up a deal for him? Could we get him to agree to come to us? Could we blow Newcastle out the water with such an astronomical high fee that they have to say yes? I think all of that is fanciful thinking, if we're all being honest. I think I can't see us bidding over 100 million. I can't see Newcastle wanting to sell to us. I could potentially see Bruno being convinced by us to come under Zerbi and maybe him looking for a new challenge. But I also can't see us convincing him over another top club, whether it be a top club in Spain or one of the teams in the Champions League here in England. I can't see us convincing him to come over one of those clubs if they are in for him. If they're not in for him, it's a different story. So I rate the chances of us signing as slim to none. But Zerbi has made him his dream target. Tottenham are making moves in this window. They are moving fast. We have heard from the Lewis family, actions speak louder than words. So is there a chance? You never say never in football, and this would be one hell of a signing if we were to get Bruno Guimaraes through the door. He would just be so perfect. I would want him more than anyone in that position, I think. Anyone we've been into to talked about. I've just never really considered him because I thought not really realistic. But I wouldn't be shocked if maybe he looks to move from Newcastle United either this summer or definitely next summer if he refuses to sign a deal. I think the longer that deal leaves left unsigned, I think the more worried Newcastle get, and this is a player worth a hefty sum of money. Some comments I'm reading do make good points. They have just sold Anthony Gordon, so their desperation or their need to sell is even less than it would have been because they just got a hefty fee for Gordon. So it makes the deal even harder to do for Bruno Guimaraes. But what a signing that could be. But yeah, wait and see if there's anything that can happen there. And last but not least, we're going to talk about Mason Melia. Mason Melia has been talking to the press, and he says Tottenham striker Mason Melia wants first team football next season. I want to be playing first team football again. I've said it to the club as well. They know as well. So it's just seeing what's right, what the manager and what everyone at the club wants. At the moment, I'm not quite sure what they want me to. They want me to come into pre-season, so I want to do as well and just show the manager what I can do and do my best and see what goes from there. So Mason Melia, he wants first team football. This is a striker, by the way, who has just been called up to the Irish first team, and he's been so he's been called up to the Irish first team, and I don't know if he was given his first cap, but he was part of the squad at 18 years of age. Obviously, he came to Tottenham in January. He's not quite he's not been anywhere near the first team, and he's been playing in the under-21s. I highly doubt he's going to be part of the Tottenham first team, so maybe there is going to be a loan deal in the offing for Mason Melia. But he is clearly very certain of his own kind of potential and his own quality, and he wants first team football next season. I'm guessing that's away from Tottenham, and that's probably going to be probably on loan. But keep an eye on Mason Melia because he is making moves. Just been called up for Ireland. A lot of people are very excited about him. So Mason Melia, that is what he's had to say on his future for next season. But that is all for today's Tottenham update. Let me know in the comment section below your thoughts on everything we have discussed in that Tottenham update. But let's move on. Let's give one more shout out again before we move on to the next segment. And that is OK Jersey, who are sponsoring today's stream. Big up to them. Go and use our code Spurs15 for 15% off all your replica jerseys at okjersey.com. You go to the link. It is you can see the link on screen right now. Actually, I haven't pinned it to the chat. Let me just, one second, let me pin it to the chat, okjersey.com. Bear with, I'll pin the link to the chat. okjersey.com. Use code Spurs 15 for 15% off. So it's in the... So it's pinned to the chat. Go to okjersey.com. They have unbelievable quality shirts. They got retro shirts, all replica shirts for all 48 participating nations at the World Cup as well. They're fantastic quality. We've been super impressed with the quality, super affordable prices as well. And it's even more affordable if you use our code Spurs15 on screen right now. So go to okjersey.com and use our code Spurs15 and get all the jerseys you want. All the jerseys you could ask for. It's absolutely brilliant website. If the shirts are small, if you're looking to buy a shirt from OK Jersey, do go one size up to what you usually get if you're in the UK, because they do usually come a bit small. So if you're a small, get a medium. If you're a medium, get a large. But go and check them out. They've got so many replica shirts on there, and they're all super high quality. So go check out okjersey.com on screen right now and use our code Spurs15 for 15% off. Big up to our sponsors at OK Jersey. Let's react to Twitter. There's been a lot of reaction to the prospective signing of Jan-Paul van Hecke to Spurs. It didn't come out of nowhere because we've been linked with him, but it's been a shock to everyone that we've been advancing on the move this morning. Everyone woke up to the news of that bomber of Jan-Paul van Hecke this morning, and there's been a lot of reaction to the signing of Jan-Paul van Hecke. So let's go over to X and let's see what people have got to say about the prospective signing about Jan-Paul van Hecke. We'll start off with Lily White Rose. Gareth, there you go. We'll start with Lily White Rose. Gareth, well, he's replying to Gareth McCarthy, says easy to assume Romero's going, will Van de Ven be following? So Lily White Rose is thinking, no, I imagine it means either Vucevic goes on loan or Van de Ven is set to play left back for the Netherlands at the World Cup. We'll see him excel, and this may become his position at Tottenham. On this basis, you would expect maybe a doggy to be the one moved on. I mean, that is one potential solution. That would probably mean Romero staying, or not Romero staying, but Van de Ven going left back. That means you could have Van Hecke with Senesi and Van de Ven all in a back three, maybe Porro right back inverting, pushing up a bit. I mean, that could potentially happen. I mean, I could see a world where he does move Van de Ven to left back, and he kind of doesn't ask Van de Ven to just stay back, doesn't push him forward much, keeps maybe the left winger Savinho high and wide. He uses the midfielder in that space, whoever that is, in the midfield three, gets Porro inverting. I mean, it could be very, very interesting if that could be the case. Could that also be a pathway to Romero staying, having Romero, Van Hecke on the right, with Danso Senesi on the left, with Van de Ven left back, with Robertson and the doggy leaving. A doggy is the one who's very, very injury prone. So there is a argument to suggest if we could get money for a doggy, could that be the way forward for next season, using Van de Ven predominantly as a left back with an alternative of Robertson, get some money for a doggy, and then use those other players as centre backs. Or even bring Vucevic back in and use him as alternative to Van Hecke. And then you have Senesi and Danso on the other side. Very interesting prospect. I don't think that's what we're going to do. I do think Occam's razor is probably going to be in effect here, and that is that Van Hecke is probably just a natural replacement for Romero, and Van Hecke and Van de Ven are going to form a partnership. And then Senesi plays backup. That's probably the most likely, but you have to say Senesi is a very good player, and he hasn't come here to sit on the bench after a stellar season at Bournemouth. So I do wonder what the Zerbi plans for Van Hecke and Senesi next season. We'll have to wait and see. Scouting Stats has done a bit of a scout report on Jan Paul Van Hecke. He says Spurs have had an opening bid for Jan Paul Van Hecke, rejected, but talks continue, and the man pushing for him knows him well. Zerbi had Van Hecke in Brighton and now wants to build his team backline around him, likely replacement for Romero. So how do the two compare? On the ball, it isn't close. Among centre-backs in the top 5 leagues, Van Hecke is 98th percentile for final third passes, 92nd for long balls, and 89th for total passes. He's a genuine build-up from the back, distributing exactly the profile De Zerbi system runs on. Romero is a better pure defender head-to-head. He wins more tackles, more aerial duels success rate, and makes more recoveries. Swapping one for the other means trading a front-footed ball winner for a calmer, more progressive passer. De Zerbi clearly wants the ball-playing upgrade, but upgrade his system is built around. At reported 70 million with 1 year left in his deal. It is a big call. See, what I would say about this, what he's bringing up here when it comes to Van Hecke. So can you zoom in on some of the charts? So this is a chart. This is Van Hecke from against defenders in the top 5 leagues. So as you can see in this pie graph on the right there in the blue, long passes completed, final third passes, he's top notch. What areas to worry about? Aerial duel success rate there on the left is only 40%. Dribble is not something to worry about. So someone who's that tall, you expect him to be a bit better there. Duels 62nd percentile, not the best, but still above average. So look, it's a pretty strong graph here for Van Hecke, if we're being honest. But what he really excels is his passing. Go to the next graph. This is Van Hecke compared to Cuti Romero. Cuti Romero is in the orange, and Van Hecke's in the blue. So as you can see, Van Hecke does perform better with his passing. More passes, better long ball passing, although passing accuracy is exactly the same, by the way. But he performs more passes. I think that's more a reflection on Romero playing under Frank and Van Hecke playing under Zerbi. Because this is just for Van Hecke playing under Hertzler, because this is just for last season. This isn't like an overall thing. So I think the assertion that this article makes is actually wrong. And I think what you should really take away from this is actually Romero is just a better overall player, because what this tweet suggests is Van Hecke's a better passer, a calmer passer, but Romero's a better defender. But I would argue that the passing is only better from Van Hecke because Romero's played last season predominantly under Frank and Tudor, whereas Van Hecke's played in a much more attacking system, which is much more suits those progressive passes, so for me, you look at that, Romero's much better aerial duel success rate, much better ground duel success rate, duels in general recoveries as well, interceptions, tackles. He's a much more front-footed defender, and he gets a lot involved in duels. And I don't think he's a worse passer. I know the stats suggest that in this graph, that Van Hecke plays more successful long balls and final third passes, but that's because he's playing more passes, and he was playing more passes because he had more of the ball, because they had more possession under Hertzler than we did under Frank. If Romero had as many passes as Van Hecke did, I think those other stats go up as well. I'm not convinced Van Hecke is a better passer than Romero, but it's very encouraging to suggest how good Van Hecke is at passing. So I think what I learned from this is, from that element, the passing element on the ball, there isn't going to be a drop-off for Van Hecke, I think, from Romero to Van Hecke, because Van Hecke is a very accomplished passer of the ball. But I think the stats suggest, from when it comes to aerial duel success and just duels in general, Romero does outperform Van Hecke quite significantly. So is that something we're going to be missing with the switch? You go to the next graph. I guess is this some Football Manager kind of stats they've got on the top right there? Aerial 14, I'm guessing is out of 20. Long passes 17, short pass 14, stamina 18. But when it comes to a lot of people saying he's slow, that's one of the big problems when it comes to Jan-Paul Van Hecke. Let me see. So yeah, as you say, his top strengths are passing to final third, long balls 1, accurate passes, touches. So he's obviously a set piece threat as well. So look, there's a lot to be excited about. I think he's kind of like the perfect replacement for Romero. But do I believe he's a better player than Romero? No, but I do think he's a very accomplished replacement. And I think, as I've always said, I think we're going to find it very, very difficult to replace Romero with a better player than him. So to find a player like Van Hecke who's doing so well in the Premier League and is maybe just as good a passer or not even that much of a drop-off is a good find, in my opinion. Let's keep going with the reactions. Ashmatic, big up to Ash. Come on. He's done a little scout report, and he says, Spurs submit bid for Van Hecke. He's one of the highest rated defenders, and he is a build-up maestro. Big up to Ash. He's done a little scout report. Percentile in the top 5. One touch passing, 93%. Pressure passing, 93%. Through balls, 93% percentile. Duels, 93% percentile. Positioning, 93%. And one-on-one defending. So if you can make the scout report a bit bigger. Yeah, you can see there. You can see his heat map. This is all coming from SofaScore. His heat map, you can see on the top right-hand corner there, covers a lot of ground. Very comfortable on the ball in the opposition half and in the middle part of the pitch. You can see some of his stats here. He's done a strong signing for Spurs. 8 out of 10. That's what he he says is. Good Premier League level centre, already performing at solid Premier League level, reliable, composed, impactful. With development, he has the ceiling to become one of the best centre backs in the league. Weaknesses can be exposed in a one-on-one foot race versus elite pace. Occasional lapses in concentration. Needs to add more physical dominance. So those are things he could all work on. Yeah, it's kind of what I gather from Van Hecke is for such a big physical tall player, he could work on using those physical traits to really dominate his opponents. Maybe a bit like Van der Ven, who kind of, when he first came, he's 6'4", so tall, but wasn't so aerially dominant, and maybe that's something he could work on. Spencer Mossman says 70 million for Jan-Paul Van Hecke seems ridiculous, but I'm not sure it is. An under-discussed theme in the Premier League is that the centre-back own the responsibility of progression more so than any other league. This was the case for Zerbi at Brighton, 3 centre-backs in the league for the league's top 20 for a shared team progression in both seasons. Non-scientific evidence of this trend beyond Zerbi being that there are only 3 Premier League midfielders in the top 20 for team share of progression in the top 5 leagues, but 8 centre-backs. Having Senesi and Van Hecke is a build-up and squad-building cheat code, but it's also an advantage to have two of the 3 best 3 or 4 prime age progressive centre-backs in Europe, because it means your rivals can't. Also means midfield recruitment can be less rigid. The type of player to be brought in, if any, can have a wider range of skills. This does require an understanding that transfer fees are simply just more expensive now. The old saying, run into an arsehole in the morning, you run into an arsehole. Run into an arsehole all day, you're probably the arsehole, applies in a funny way. Repeatedly keep being shocked by quoted transfer fees. Maybe it's you that needs to recalibrate. There are, of course, reasons to not like this. I'm not saying it's perfect. He's not super mobile. His contract expires in a year unless there's a back channel knowledge by all parties and agreement here is imminent. But on the whole, one of the best centre-backs in the league in his prime. This profile will never, ever be cheap. And he's posted a graph here. This is the share of teams' progression in the value. And this is in Europe's top 5 leagues. And sitting top of both is Van Hecke and Marcos Senesi, who will both, well, hopefully Van Hecke will, but Senesi will definitely be playing his football at Tottenham next season. And I think that goes to show where our recruitment is definitely clearly been laser focused on having players in the back line who can build up the ball to an effective way, to what the way Zerbi wants us to. And Senesi and Van Hecke are 2 players who have been doing it week in, week out for the last couple of years at clubs, who have been front-footed, looking to build up at the back, and they've been doing it to a very high standard, higher standard than most other centre-backs in the league, in Europe's top 5 leagues, it seems. This is defenders of Tottenham with over 900 minutes. So Tottenham have clearly seen that and said, if we can get these guys building up from the back for us, I think it's going to be very difficult for teams to press us next season under Roberto De Zerbi. So I think, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're starting to put the pieces together as not just why Van Hecke, we want him just because of De Zerbi's here and they played with him. There's real tactical reasons as well why Van Hecke would be a phenomenal asset to us alongside Marcos Senesi. Gradient Sports says the 18th ranked player in our top 50 players of the 25-26 season. Last season's Brighton, Jan-Paul Van Hecke ranked as the Premier League's best passer in our grading system, regardless of position. While not quite as dominant this year, he still finished in the league's top 10 for passing grade and led the division in completed line-breaking passes, a total of 42 more than anyone else. Combined with an 85.4 Jules grade, ranked 12th among centre-backs, Van Hecke has continued to show his quality both on and off the ball. So this is Van Hecke in a graph for centre-backs, I think. For on the left axis is passes completed. On the right, on the bottom axis, it's Jules. And as you can see, Van Hecke is there as an outlier, really. Someone who's near the top of his passing and near the top of the Jules as well, and not far up next to him on to the left is Senesi. So 2 players, really high Jules success rate, better than most, and more importantly, really high passing completion as well. So you can see, looking at that graph, why Tottenham have earmarked those 2 centre-backs and have gone early. We have gone very early with these signings. We have pursued them with kind of laser guided kind of precision, as these players, we need them at our club. Zerbi has been very forthright. I know what I want. I know the players that I want. I know what kind of profile I want. And the club have been saying recently, actions speak louder than words. We have not been laser focused on footballing success, but we're gonna starting this process, we are going to be really going for our targets and going early. Zerbi said, I want my targets in early, I want my signings in early, and maybe he could be getting his wish. So, looking at that graph, that's, you can see there why we have targeted Van Hecke with such precision and very, very early. Squawker have released a graph comparing Van Hecke to Marcos Senesi. Here's a comparison. So as you can see, very similar profiles, both excelling at very similar things. Van Hecke outperforming Senesi at offside traps, duels won, and aerial duels won, whereas Senesi is outperforming Van Hecke with interceptions, clearances, blocked shots. When it comes to take-ons, long pass accuracy, Van Hecke outperforms him. Ball recoveries, Senesi outperforms. Very similar to passes in the opposition half, and opposition passes into the final third. But as you can see, profiling very, very similarly, Senesi and Van Hecke. So clearly we're going for a very specific type of centre-back, someone with extremely high effective build-up play and really strong within the duels as well. And you can see that from the data that's been laid out in front of you. Very specific profiles we are going for in the centre-back kind of role, especially in replacement to Romero, and as well to add to our centre-back roster. Brighton Buzz has been tweeting. He's a Brighton fan account. He says, Van Hecke feels open to a move to improve his career, but at Spurs, someone please explain this to me. And he says down, like a downward trajectory. He's now, actually, you know what? I just went to open up the tweet and it seems he's now deleted it. So maybe he's been put in his place. Here's the reality, guys. We had Bournemouth fans saying the same thing about Senesi. You've now got Brighton fans saying the same thing about Van Hecke. Spurs finished 17th. Van Hecke's got European football to look forward to. Same with Senesi. They finished 6th. They potentially were very close to getting Champions League football last season. They're onto a good thing. Why would they jump ship and go to teams like Tottenham? Because we're bigger clubs. We are a bigger club. That's just reality. We can probably offer higher wages. The ceiling of our clubs are higher. The reality is Brighton and Bournemouth probably hit their ceiling last season, or it's going to be, they need astronomical investment to really close the gap to those clubs in the top 5. Tottenham had a historically bad season, don't get me wrong, and have been not well run, but they know if Tottenham do things correctly, our ceiling is way higher than Brighton and Bournemouth. Brighton and Bournemouth have to be performing at the very, very best of their ability just to get, Europa League football. Whereas Tottenham, our ceiling is higher. We have been Champions League regulars before. We can be Champions League regulars if we're well run. So if they come here, fix our ship, they know they could be challenging for much higher things than if they're just basically trying to keep pace with those top teams at these smaller clubs. And the reality is, at the end of the day, they keep selling their best players. Their players are always up for sale, and they're always having to go again with recruitment and all this kind of stuff. And it's very difficult to keep up those high standards every single year when you're losing your best players, and they're going to bigger clubs, and they're going to clubs who are strengthening themselves with big investment, and these smaller clubs are continually having to reinvest. They're doing a great job. They're very, very smart. They're very well run, but it doesn't mean that over the long term they're going to be able to compete with clubs like Tottenham, who just financially are bigger teams, better stadium, better facilities, and they've got a manager like Zerbi at the helm who, or maybe there is hope that Tottenham could be turning it around. So as much as these fans will bemoan the fact that they, on the face of it, are in a better position to us right now, and they're performing better, and there's no doubt about it, the latter of that is true, but are they in a better position to compete? unfortunately, it just isn't the case. And it never will be until these teams like Brighton and Bournemouth get into a stage where they are able to hang on to their best players and actually compete with these teams higher up in the league consistently by hanging on to their best players rather than continuing to sell. It's always going to be the case of where there's bigger fish to these clubs, unfortunately. Seb, big up to Seb. He says Van Hecke and Van der Ven is a very good partnership in my eyes. Dutch connection, complement each other very well. Get it done, Tottenham, for under 50 million. As I've said, I'll want it done for a bit cheaper because I think that makes sense for that to be his price tag. But for me, I would pay the 50 million if it means it doesn't drag on, and I would pay the fee because we're paying to get ahead of Chelsea and Liverpool. We're paying. One sec. We're paying to get ahead of the competition. We're paying a bit of extra money to get ahead of the competition. So for me, I think it's worth spending the money to get him in early. Right, next up, it's Kish. Big up to Kish. He says Spurs summer window is going to show everyone that being a Big Six club isn't about where you finish. Hilarious that people said Spurs are no longer Big Six when they finish back-to-back 17th. Go nab Senesi and Savinho and Van Hecke. And that's also a great point. We finished 17th and we're nabbing Bournemouth, one of Bournemouth's better players, Brighton's better players, and potentially Savinho as well. Next up, we have another chart showing why we have targeted Senesi and Van Hecke. This chart is percentage of build-up involvements on the bottom and line-breaking passes along the left. And look at the two outliers. Look at these two outliers, both Van Hecke and Senesi. That is the reason why we are targeting these two players. These two players perform outrageously when it comes to what Zerbi looks for in a centre-back. Interestingly, if you look right in the middle there is Cuti Romero, who's right bang in the middle, just below him, Kevin Danso. Romero maybe not as high as he could be. I would say that is more to do with how we've been playing rather than Romero himself. I think put him in a different system, he would be performing very similarly to the likes of Senesi and Van Hecke. But the fact that Senesi and Van Hecke are such key outliers there, that just goes to show how effective they are at the role that we want them to play. So just look at that graph there. They outperform everyone in build-up, and they outperform everyone by a lot in line-breaking passes as well. So we're going to have two of the best ball-playing centre-backs in the league joining our football club potentially this summer. Time to get excited. I think we're going to be so press-resistant, no one's going to be able to press us with those two at the back. And finally, another graph here. This is also Spurs showing Van Hecke last season. As you can see, really performs really well in a lot of different metrics. Completed along the top here, passing the final third, progressive passes, through balls, progressive carries, all very, very strong. Long passes, defensive duels won, all this kind of stuff. So, look, that is Jan Paul Van Hecke. That is how the internet reacted. And also a bit of analysis of why we want Jan Paul Van Hecke at Tottenham Hotspur next season, why we're pushing hard to bring him before the window, before the window is even open and before the World Cup. I think, if it's outlined there, you can see why we want Jan Paul Van Hecke. All right, we are going to bring on Brian Daigle. Let's send him the link. And we are going to get Brian Daigle on. And we're going to talk about, with Brian as well, what we think about what the signing of Jan Paul Van Hecke actually means for us. But before that, let's give another shout out to OK Jersey. Use one sec. Let me just put it in the. Bear with me. Okay, I'm gonna just pin that. All right. Go and check out okjersey.com for the best replica jerseys out there. If you use our code Spurs15 on screen right now, you get 15% off. And the jerseys, you go on the website, OK Jersey, are really great quality. They've got unbelievable amount of retro replica kits, current replica kits, training kits like this one. All 48 nations as well. They have kits for all nations participating in the World Cup. So if you order your jerseys now, you can get your jerseys in time for the World Cup, which is under a week away now. So go and get your jerseys at okjersey.com. Link is in the pinned to the chat at the moment, and it's you can see it on screen. okjersey.com, 15% off all football kits. So it's already very affordable, about £15 for most kits on the website, but it's even more affordable with Spurs15 as your code for 15% off. Really, really great quality kits, by the way. Really, you would not be able to tell they're replicas. Fantastic stuff, and they've got such a wide range of jerseys there on the website. All the jerseys you can ask for. So go and check out okjersey.com. They deliver worldwide, fairly fast delivery as well. Get it within a week to 10 days. Really highly recommended. We've been using them ourselves. So go check out, and don't forget to use our code Spurs15. All right, let's get someone on the show. One second, check my headphones. And I want to know how he is feeling about all this flurry of transfer news. How he is faring at the moment with this incredible start to the summer. Let's get on Brian Daigle on the show. Brian!
What's up,
What a
Simeone?
pleasure to have you on. What a pleasure to have you on the show, my man. As per
Mate,
usual.
I've got you all to myself. There's no better.
Us two. Just us two.
It's quality time.
Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. So,
Just the two of us.
you and I. Come on. Big up to Brian. I'm not going to start every call like that. Brian.
Yes.
What in the Van Heck is going on at this football club right now? I got
wonder
that
where
one
you got-
from you, Brian. I got that from Brian, by the way. He voice noted that to me earlier. What a brilliant shout that is. But the window's not open yet.
Yep.
It looks like we've got Robertson and Senesi wrapped up.
Yep.
Savinho is in advanced talks, it looks like. And now we're pushing hard for Van Hecke before the World Cup, with Liverpool and Chelsea sniffing around. Looks like we're trying to beat the competition to get them through the door. I mean, it's been one... I mean, you know what? The Lewis family have been saying actions speak louder than words. Is that what we're seeing at the moment?
So first of all, I will say I hope everyone in the chat is having a wonderful day, evening, wherever they are, whatever. I must say, working these night shifts has been wonderful, because I go for my lunch at about 3:15 in the morning my time, which is about 8:15 your time. And every single time I've gone out, I've woken up or got out to a bomber. And literally, this one broke about 10 minutes before my break. And this is a great deal if we can get it done. There's so much to unpack with it. First of all, last year of his contract. The only main reason that I believe there is a massive amount of weight for this is the Roberto De Zerbi effect. If it hadn't been him, if we'd had any other manager, I think the ones that are sniffing around, Liverpool, Chelsea, would have been obviously in pole position for obvious reasons. But I think the pull of De Zerbi for him, we've seen it before, like Harry Redknapp with Defoe, Crouch, Cranshaw. There's certain players that they have an affinity to their manager, and they will go where they reunite with them. Another great thing, should this happen, is for years and years and years, we as Spurs fans collectively have said, you know what, bring in the replacement before you sell the person out the door, so we're not left short. So then the rest of the world doesn't know we're looking for a player in that position. Him coming in would mean Romero going out, wouldn't it? Let's be honest with each other.
That's what I wanted to talk about. That's one, but we keep going. I want to get
you
on
got
to
to think.
that.
So we look at it, i.e., with the perfect example I can give is Christian Eriksen. When it was Bruno Fernandes, but we were waiting to get Eriksen out the door to do it. We missed out on him. We ended up with Gedson Fernandes. There have been Harry Kane. Harry Kane goes, Heung-min Son.
Yeah.
Where the player goes and we don't have the replacement in. I think there's real weight to this, and only because of De Zerbi. Only because of De Zerbi. I think it will be an incredible addition. And then you look at it, like you said, the passing that him and Senesi have. Then you look at... it's about building a squad, isn't it? So if we look at those four centre-backs and say Van der Ven and Senesi, let's just say Danso and Van Hecke, that is a very, very strong four. I mean, even if you look back at the days of Jan and Toby, we had people like Kevin Wimmer, Clement Longley, and all. The drop-off was so severe but that four is a great, strong back four. People have been saying Van Hecke's slow. Okay, he may be slow. Van der Ven isn't the best at heading. Danso isn't the best distribution. We're not going to sign, because of where we've been recently, we're not going to sign elite players that don't have any faults whatsoever. I think Van Hecke will be an incredible bit of business, Sim. And to cap off what you were saying, I like Spurs today. Do you ever watch, and a lot of people, it's a worldwide show, you know that BBC show, Would I Lie to You?
Yeah.
With Rob, you know, with David Mitchell and Bob Mortimer, when they're like, the story is so fake that it has to be true. This is what it's with Spurs. We keep hearing these names, and it's like, oh yeah, but season ticket renewal is about to go. Oh, it's season ticket. Wait till. This is what we've had months. We've had windows where we don't move quick at all, and we just hear a billion names, and then we wait till halfway through the window. Like you said, yes, we need a left winger, and whether Savinho's the right answer or another one's coming, that's to be decided. But if someone has said to any Spurs fan at any time of life, going into this summer, before the window even opens, there could be Savinho, Robinson, Senesi and Van Hecke, every single Spurs fan would say, what drugs do you want?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's huge.
People would bite your hand off for that, and I think I've always said, you know, if Romero is to go, the perfect replacement would be Van Hecke, because his passing, he's the only one who I think his passing's not a massive drop off to what Romero's is. De Zerbi knows him well. He's also, I think the key thing for me is him and Senesi. They've been showing their qualities in the Premier League, but not just in the Premier League. They've been showing them for teams who are front-footed teams, brave teams, you know, like play a high line. They're aggressive teams as well. So they're not like he hasn't been playing for like teams who are low block and he's just protected. Like he's been playing for teams who are front-footed, so he can translate that into a team we want to be in Tottenham. And I think clearly I've shown it with the data, and I think we're clearly targeting a certain profile of centre-backs that De Zerbi wants. And obviously De Zerbi has been pushing for players who are extremely effective in build-up when passing out the back, extremely effective when it comes to beating the press and their line-breaking passes and all this kind of stuff, that to get Tottenham up the pitch, to make Tottenham more, you know, much better team than we saw last season, which was, you know, a really hard team to watch. And Van Hecke is, if we can get him through the door, if we can get a deal agreed, it's phenomenal. Now, a lot of people saying, obviously, there's a suggestion that Brian have asked for 70 million. Now they're saying maybe 50 million, and Tottenham want to agree a deal for around 45. For a player left with 1 year left on his deal, do you think that, you know, let's say Brighton are digging their heels in at 50 million. Is that an overpayment? Should we pass on that, or do we just pay the money?
Well, as soon as you said 45, I'm absolutely convinced now that the fee is 50 million, because Spurs do love a 5 million apart, don't they? And then we go into battle for the 5 mil. The way I look at it, 50 million for a player that's in the last season of his contract, who walks in and immediately knows the De Zerbi way of football. He walks in and immediately will know how De Zerbi wants to play football better than anyone at our football club. Has developed into a very, very, very good, well-respected, in-demand centre-back. When you see that as well, then you think if we sell Romero, you're probably looking at around 50 mil anyway, aren't you?
Yeah. We
can all go wild. Some people say, oh, he's not even worth that much. Some people will say he's worth a lot more. I think 50 mil, look, it's not our money. This is what I've wanted to see. Spurs going in and buying quality Premier League proven players that can help the squad. And Van Hecke is certainly a defender that will do that.
I think, for me, in maybe other circumstances, could you maybe wait to see how the window goes and see if, because the longer the window goes on and the longer Van Hecke's not signing that contract, could Brighton get nervous and lower their price? And could you maybe pick him up at the end of the window for like 35 million rather than pay 50 or 45 now? I think you probably could. If Chelsea came in early, he's your player, right? The longer the deal gets left unsigned, you could potentially get Chelsea in his ear, you could get Liverpool in his ear, who both are desperate for centre-backs, by the way. They could come in and say, look, we're willing to stump up a certain amount of money. You come and join us, you're going to start for us. But if we get ahead of the competition, we get the deal over the line before they even come to the table, then all of a sudden you're beating the competition, you're getting him through the door. And that's the main thing. I think way too often in these kind of deals, I think if Daniel Levy was in charge, he would say, look, we're not paying that amount of money for a player with 1 year left in his deal, and we're gonna allow this to run down till the end of the window, until deadline day, and he knows on deadline day that they're gonna have to drive the price down, because if they want to sell, then we have the power in that scenario. So that's where I think we would be if Levy was in charge. But then we risk not getting him at all because other teams can get involved in negotiation. I think it's really smart and actually surprising that with a player left with 1 year left, we've gone in and say, look, we're prepared to pay this amount. We want to get him now, and we're going in with this with like a laser precision to try and get him through the door immediately.
So two things with that. First of all, what you got to remember as well, he could go to the World Cup, have a blinding World Cup, and then even bigger clubs.
Yeah.
Could come in and say, right, well, what do you want? And we'll get the deal done. And then also, what you got to look at, like you said, taking advantage. Surely this is what we were told the PSR and FFP advantage was about. To be able to say, all right, you want it, but now this is where we've got the advantage. We're going to flex the muscles that we've actually worked hard to get. And like I said, it's the De Zerbi factor. And you can say that with anyone. Like we're looking at it right now, and fans will get worried with Iriola. Is Liverpool going to come and hijack Senesi? Well, this is our version, not obviously because of the fee, but it's the Van Hecke and De Zerbi, and Van Hecke loves De Zerbi. And you'll go there, and you're going to get played. You know what the manager wants. You know what the manager demands. You know the manager can improve you. And like you said, the trying to play cat and mouse, we've lost every single time, haven't we? Mm-hmm. We've dillied a day. Look at Eze. And I'm not just talking about last summer, I'm talking prior seasons. If we just come in and stump the money, he's ours. And we've missed out on so many players by doing this that now we've got the advantage to do it. I think 50 million is a snip, in all honesty. If that is the fee, I think it's a great bit of business.
Yeah, I think it's worth paying the money. In terms of how we think, one sec, some people are saying sound. I can hear you fine. If you can hear me fine, I don't know.
It's like people can't hear me, or people might actually like not hearing me. Who knows?
Okay, people are saying it's all right now. I want to. So, in terms of how the signing of Van Hecke might affect our defence and our future as well, because me and Ben have been having conversations around what we should do with our centre backs is should Romero leave. Now we think obviously Van Hecke's just replacing Romero like for like, right? It's interesting. There was a suggestion. I think Lido Arroz suggested on X. Is it possible that maybe Romero's not the full guy and it's someone like a Doggy who's very injury prone? You move Van de Ven to left back and then you have Van Hecke, Romero, you have Senesi and Van de Ven moving over to left back potentially as options. But I think it probably is the case, isn't it? He's just going to replace Romero. It's just going to be that simple. Romero's going to be out and Van Hecke coming in. But we've had these conversations because Vuskovic is set to come back to Spurs this summer. 19 years of age, just got into Bundesliga Team of the Year, flying reports. If we're signing Van Hecke, Brian, what do we do with Vuskovic? What does that mean for him? And is there a worry like that if we don't give Vuskovic a pathway now, after the season he's had, are we kind of guilty of being putting too many obstacles in the way of a pathway of loan players coming into the club? Because Vuskovic couldn't have done any more, could he, to get into the first team? Like he had the perfect season. Player was nominated for Player of the Year in Germany, and I understand he's 19. And I understand there are still question marks how it translates to Premier League and all these different things. And, is he ready to be first choice of Tottenham? I think those are legitimate questions. But if you're just looking at it objectively when it comes to just looking at him as any other loan player, bringing him to the first team, and if that's his goal to going out on loan, one day he wants to be in our first team, right? He couldn't have done any more. He's gone on loan and he's had the perfect loan spell. He couldn't have done any more. So if he can't get into our first team after a season like that, are we putting too many roadblocks in the way of getting someone like Vuskovic into the first team if we're signing someone like Van Hecke right now?
So I'm hoping and praying Vuskovic signs a contract extension and we obviously bump his wages up, whatever. If that happens, I can't believe the end of the sentence. What I'm going to say, it'll be music to your ears, and it's going to hurt me. But I'm a man that stands by what I say. If he signs a contract extension, I would love to see him on loan at a Premier League club. So we see firsthand, and it's like, right. And then he has the season he has. Then, like I said, I as much as I love players, I've said I've had enough of sentiment. And if you can upgrade, you upgrade. If he went to the Premier League or he goes back to Germany and has another incredible loan, then maybe it's Danso that goes next summer. And you have Van Hecke and Vuskovic. Then you've got two huge defenders of very similar stature. It's all the jig, because if Vuskovic smashes it again next season, especially if it was a Premier League loan, then Danso would be the one that I'd say has to go. And better than most my love for that man. So you can look at it that way. But then, like you said, I've seen a few people mentioning Van de Ven to left back, which obviously is an option. I think he's done it for Holland a couple of times.
He starts for Holland at left back.
The thing, and even if you do that, can you imagine? And this is just hypotheticals. If we do have Savinho, who, as we know, is a very, very tricky technical whatever. If fullbacks and midfielders see Van de Ven flying along that side, the whole of that left side is like, well, do I mark him at his blinding pace? Do I keep an eye on his trickery? So the versatility checks in, doesn't it? But I would honestly say Vuskovic goes and has a great World Cup, or even an okay World Cup. If we get him on a contract, if he signs the contract extension we think he will, or rumour that Spurs are chasing, I wouldn't mind seeing him have one more loan team, but I would prefer it to be a Premier League club so we can see close hand, this is what this kid can do. Because I just called him a kid, but I'm not even really calling him a kid, because that physique, that stature, and what he's doing. You look at people like they said when Rooney came through and other youngsters, Robbie Fowler, Owen, they weren't going on about Owen's size or Fowler's height or whatever. Obviously, it's a different position, but I would love to see Vuskovic at close quarters at middle, bottom of the top half up Premier League team and see what he can do. But I think Vuskovic is definitely part of the future. And then you even bring in the guy that I love a load as well, Ashley Phillips, who I believe will be a very good defender for us, or a very good defender, hopefully, for us.
Yeah, it's going to be like bringing Van Hecke. It's going to be very interesting to see how our defense lines up. You would assume maybe Van Hecke and Van der Ven would still be our first choice, but 100% could definitely get lots of games where you have a Van Hecke, Senesi, and Van der Ven a left back, and then I think because sometimes Zerbi does this thing where he does his lopsided kind of defense, right? Gives Porro maybe a bit of license to invert or get forward, and just tells Van der Ven, you hang back, just make sure maybe he moves into a back three. He protects Savinho on that side. Maybe even tells Savinho you don't have to track back as much because Van der Ven's going to be there every time. And then that back three could potentially be our starting three going forward. And that obviously leaves questions for... obviously, in that scenario, then you could bring in a Vuskovic potentially for next season, knowing he might get a lot of game time if one of those three needs rotating. Maybe then at that point, if you move Van der Ven to left back, could you sell a Doggy? You know, given that he's so injury prone and we're struggling to get him on the pitch, if you get a decent offer for him, you convert Van der Ven to left back. You just having him and Robertson rotating. I mean, is that viable, or would you like to keep a Doggy?
Mate, do you know what? When I was with you in the studio, when I came back to England and just beforehand, the game I came back to England last season was the draw at Brighton, the 2-2, where we were 2-0 down and came back. That was Destiny's first game back that season. And for that little period before he got injured again, I think we looked the best we did all season, especially under Frank, was when Destiny was there to add balance to the left side. When he is fit and when he is on it, he is an absolute handful. But it's come to the point now where if we want to get back to where we are, we can't rely on, if he's fit and on form. He's injured too many times. I'd love it if he could stay fit. If he could stay fit, I think he's incredible. If he could stay fit, but we always say the best availability is sometimes the best thing to have.
The best ability is availability.
There you go. That's thank you, Simeon. There you go. You complete me. You really do. But yeah, this is the thing. I do love Destiny if we look at it under Ange in that first 6 months before he got his contract, right-siders didn't know what to do with him. But then all these injuries came in, and you look at it with this back four again, with the four defenders we're talking about. He can also not only can De Zerbi rotate and keep him fresh. There's going to be certain games where maybe a Senesi and a Danso are going to be more suited to defending against, and De Zerbi can have his pick because all four of them are very, very good defenders, but each one of them have a very, very key attribute where they're ahead of the others. And it really gives him options, and it's something we haven't been able to. I mean, Sim, you're a Spurs guru when it comes to this. If it is Van Hecke, Danso, Senesi, and Van der Ven, let's say they're locked in, they're signed, it's official. When was the last time Spurs had a back four of that quality?
Well, 4 centre backs.
Yeah, I'm just talking about centre backs.
Yeah.
Right,
I don't think we ever have, because when you think about when we had Alderweireld and Vertonghen, our backups were Wimmer and who was the other one? I can't even remember. It was like Wimmer and
Foyth. Sanchez at one point.
Nothing that holds a candle to, you're talking about Senesi and Danso, who are much higher standard to those players. So, I mean, and potentially Vuskovic, but if it's just those four, it's probably the best 4 centre-backs as a collection we've ever had. I mean, obviously, you could maybe argue Vertonghen and Toby maybe still start, but as a collection of centre-backs, I don't think we've ever had two better backups than potentially Senesi and Danso.
That's the thing. I mean, you look at it, I remember clearly the first season with Poch where we were going for the title. Van der Ven got injured with his hamstring, and Wimmer came in, and we're like, oh no, here we go. But for that part of the season, Wimmer actually deputised very, very well. But then when he had to come in next season, he was a shade of the player. But you look at that, and as a four, if that is the four next season, whatever two De Zerbi picks, I'd be happy with.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, I can. I don't see. Obviously, Van Hecke with his. But I'll be like, I've got no drama with whatever two he picks.
There's some people suggesting if we do play Van Hecke and Senesi together, brilliant passing, but are they too slow if we're playing a high line? Are they going to get caught out too much? Do we need that recovery pace from Van de Ven to make sure they're not overexposed? Like, do you think that's what do you think they're thinking? We're going to play them together a lot, or maybe they're thinking one of them usually with Van de Ven?
Well, you know what, you look at it. That's why, moving on from the defenders, that's why it's so important to get a player like Paulinho, whether it is Paulinho or a number 6 that does that job. Then that puts an extra bit of security for them, and could even go into a back 3 or whatever. So that's the thing. If you play those two together, it could be pace could be a definite issue. But then their reading of the game, their understanding, and obviously it's a brand new partnership, so you never know. But that's when it's so important to have a number 6. If you look at it, when we had Carl Walker and we go Pete Poch, Carl Walker made so many mistakes defensively, but his pace would get him out of trouble. But he also had Wanyama and Dembele screening everything.
Exactly.
So should there be an error, they're like, right, we'll sniff this out and we'll have you covered. So whereas you look at that too, could be a potential combination they use. For that, it's going to be imperative to have a Paulinho.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's why. But obviously there's been talks of Sky Sports saying we definitely do need a passer in midfield, someone who can dictate a game with the ball at his feet. There's been some suggestion of Bruno Guimaraes, however unlikely. What do you reckon? Any possibility? Are we dreaming?
Mate, that is, as we said, that is the Antonio Conte, season ticket renewals due in a couple of days.
Yeah.
I would absolutely, mate, my love for that player, next to Morgan Gibbs-White, who everyone knows I adore, he is my favourite midfielder in the Premier League. I think Guimaraes is an absolutely magnificent footballer. But first of all, it would have to obliterate our transfer record.
For a soon-to-be 29-year-old, yeah.
Mate, I would literally say, right, we'll give you money, Solanke, Basuma, Dragusin. I'm like, right, how many players can we get into this deal? They probably still say no. But my God, I mean, Bruno Guimaraes, if you want a statement marquee signing, that would be it. But I think there is absolutely no chance whatsoever
Zero chance
of it happening. But you also got to remember, he absolutely adores Newcastle, the city, and they adore him. It would take ridiculous, obscene amounts of money, and we ain't going to pay it.
What do you think's led to the such early movement, Tottenham getting their act together early on right now? Obviously, even after these, if we do get Van Hecke and Savinho over the line and Robertson and Senesi, there's still a hell of a lot of work to do, right? I mean, how many more would you want? You want probably another winger. You want probably a striker, maybe 2, but definitely 1. You probably want another midfielder, maybe 2. So still a hell of a lot of work to do. You're talking about the 5 signings. So, but the early movement. What do you put that down to? Do you think last season's really scared the hierarchy into action? Do you think De Zerbi's putting them under pressure to really get these deals done as soon as possible? Do you think there are genuine, changes that have always been planned last summer? We were going for more Prem-proven players, but we didn't get them over the line. What do you reckon's going on at the moment?
I go back to what I said at the beginning with Would I Lie to You? This is what Tottenham does to your mind. This is where you're like... So first of all, 2 17th positions, 2 seasons in a row, has got to have scared the crap out of them. It's got to have, because obviously not just that, the banter and the ridicule we've come under, and for how we've been acting as a football club, rightfully so. Um, and obviously, again, my stupid desire for Frank and Lange and what this football club has been run like a business, not a football club. Um, this is what we've wanted to see, and like we said, we've had it before where we hear all these names and no movement, and then we act late. Well, now it looks like we are actually making moves. And again, do you know what the funny thing is? It's the timing of it. Because Van Hecke's come out today, loads of people have been saying, which you've probably seen on social media and in WhatsApp chats, well, we need a striker. We need a striker. Well, why are we getting another defender? The window hasn't even opened yet. And we still got 3 months of it. If we'd signed a brilliant striker, let's just say we signed Garassi, and it was all signed, then we would have got a Van Hecke. They'd be like, oh my God, that's a great move. It's all about the time and getting these. And you look at it, I grew up, unfortunately, during the George Graham days at Arsenal. And he always used to say, build a back, sort out the defence first, and then build your midfield and forwards, because if you've got a great defence and you don't concede, you don't lose. Which he proved right with boring Arsenal, 1-0 to the Arsenal. Now you look at it in modern day football, it's you've got to have a strong spine. You've got to have a strong spine. And I think both are right. Both are right. But obviously we defence going into this window, I think all Spurs fans will say, was not the main thing that needed sorting. It was that front line. But I agree with you. That front line needs a lot more work than that defence.
Yeah.
If people like Senesi, who, let's get it right, if he was on a 3-year or 2-year contract, you're looking at 40, 50 million. Van Hecke is going to cost around the 50 million. These are players that we'd want to see. Yes, they're not in the area we need, but there is. If this was transfer deadline day and we were linked with Van Hecke and the team was as it was, we'd all be going absolutely nuts because we ain't got a striker, we ain't got.
I mean, but it is what we need. I mean, not necessarily the priority, but we do need a replacement for Romero. And also, how long have we been talking about a backup for Van de Ven? Years and years we've been talking about. Ever since he's come, we haven't had a backup for him. So these aren't exactly signings which are unnecessary.
Well, put it this way, mate. If we go back in it, Van de Ven was the replacement for Vertonghen, and look how long that took. You'd say Porro was the replacement for Carl. We can go through it. The amount of times we've had to go through players to get the right one in. The other thing I will say, Romero, and if this happens, Romero is off. One thing I will say to Spurs is well done, because how many times have we said we keep players for too long, and when was their prime time to sell them and get some money and get them out of the club, we don't do it because we won't take the money or whatever goes on. If you could bring a Van Hecke out in and you get Romero out the door, because I think it's best for both parties. Forget what the fans think. I think it's good for him to move on to Spurs in a new challenge, and I think the squad and everything, then it's great business. It's literally getting the player out the door at the right time to sell him before his value starts dropping. The furore around him, and obviously, will he be at the final game or is calling out the board, whatever? It's time to cut the cord and say, right, Romero, thanks for your service. We are going to cash in on you at the peak time we can, and take time with it, because you've got to remember we're looking at incomings now. A lot of this window is going to be based on how do Spurs get players out the door that have not been, that we've stockpiled and aren't up for. People like Pape Matar, who has been, I loved him when we signed him, and when he broke through with Ange and everything, but he's not showing signs of improvement, is he? And that's another player that's just sitting there. So it's about getting these players out the door as well. And if we're getting the players out the door and actually replacing them with actual genuine quality and upgrading, that will make a nice change, won't it?
Exactly, massively. And look, it seems as though Spurs are moving quickly. It seems as though we are doing some serious business early on. And it also seems as though Zerbi has some serious pull, getting the likes of Van Hecke through the door, Savinho wanting to sign as well. So I'm liking the business at the moment. Lot to do. A lot of business still to be done, incomings and outgoings between now and the end of the transfer window. But if we can get these 4 before the window even begins, it's been a great start, hasn't it? And hopefully gives you a bit of hope going forward that, maybe we are going in the right direction.
Let's work this out. So we brought in last summer Kudus, Xavi, Paulinho, and we got one more in. Who was it? Moani, and then obviously Coach Takai. That's 5 players, and we were left short. And that was 5. If these 4 that we're mentioning, the 4 we're mentioning, come in before the window is opened, and we still got, it will be the best start to a transfer window we've ever had, ever. Whether it ends and we're left short at the end with lacking a striker, or let's just say Gibbs White because he looks like the player we want. If we get left short again, then. But as a start, we've all wanted Spurs to make early moves. We've all wanted to make Spurs bring in quality, and you got to remember, all 4 of these, if they do go ahead, will be no loans. They will be Tottenham Hotspur players, signed, sealed, delivered, not go. And I think if we get those 4 in, don't get me wrong, if I could have picked the 4 players that came in first, I would have gone very, very offensively to begin with. But if someone had said this to me before the end of the season and said, right, Spurs will act quickly and the first 4 people they're getting through the door before the window opens are these 4, would you be happy? I'd be absolutely over the moon.
And look, maybe we're going to be surprised by what kind of forward players they go to, who they can agree for. Because at the moment, I'm surprised with some of the moves they've been making. I think they've made some good signings. I think Van Hecke was especially. I thought he's definitely going to go Chelsea or Liverpool. I thought they're going to be in for him. They're desperate for centre-backs. So if we can get him through the door and show, but we still got some pull, even though we finished 17th twice, I think maybe that gives hope that in these other players that we're going to get, we can go for in the forward line, can surprise us as well. And I think right now, I mean, when you look before, like some of the signings we've been going for in previous windows, it's been very underwhelming. And it's been kind of like players who don't move the needle, but I think at least these kind of players, well, I mean, we'll have to wait and see in players like Savinho, but I definitely think like Senesi and Van Hecke are 2 brilliant signings with Prem experience, exactly what we need. And I'm just delighted that we're really going for them, like with such precision, going early with confidence as well. And look, let's see if we can get them over the line. But look, Brian, appreciate you coming on, my man. Appreciate you giving your time.
Always a pleasure.
Let's just hope that this window keeps going from strength to strength, and we can get these signings over the line, and we can have a fantastic window. And if they can fulfil their word, then we'll, maybe we can start going the right direction, and we can have hope that this club isn't the utter clown show mess that it has been for a number of years now. Maybe exactly. This is the summer it turns. We'll have to wait and see. It's too early to say that. We've heard that.
Here we go again. Here we go again with the summer. All I will say very quickly, Sim, last thing. With Savinho, I would want another left winger as well. And the only reason I say it is Kudus and Savinho, both very, and I've heard you say it as well, incredible dribblers, incredible technical ability, incredible getting past their man or anything. End product. That's the issue. Obviously, Kudus racked up a few assists before he got injured. But these, like I said, the main attributes are technical ability, getting past players, blah, blah, blah. It's not, we've got Odegaard, Tell, whatever, who, don't get me wrong, Savinho's better, but we've got so many players that get to the byline and have got no end product and decision making. It would concern me if it's just reliant on those 2 all the time. So I would want another one. I'd want another winger who is very, very good at getting balls, very good delivery. That would be my one thing if Savinho comes in. But Savinho for me is a bag full of potential and has a very, very high ceiling. But as we know with Spurs, it's whether he hits them. So I would want just a guy on the left that's got better delivery than him. Doesn't have to be a showboat. Don't even have to be big money. Could be like a Paulinho deal. Just go get someone that delivers that ball. Like when we had Perisic. Delivery, delivery, delivery. But we'll see. But like I said, Sim, enjoy the rest of your day. Everyone in the chat, have a wonderful day, whatever you're doing. And I will speak to you all soon. Much love to you, Sim.
Big up to you, Brian. Appreciate you
Bye,
coming
bro.
on as always, man.
Bye-bye.
Well, if we got Brian excited, then who knows what we're capable of. But look, appreciate everyone on the stream today. Any other news that breaks, we will bring to you later on. But look, exciting times at the moment in this current time in the window. Van Hecke potentially coming through the door. Savinho as well. Senesi and Robertson already looking like they've signed. So let's see what else the window has in store. We'll keep you updated with all further developments. Appreciate everyone coming on the stream today. And big up to Brian as always. One more shout out to OK Jersey. Go and get your jerseys on okjersey.com. Use our code Spurs15. Really high quality replica kits. Spurs retro shirts, current shirts, jackets, training shirts as well. All very, very high quality for really affordable prices, and even more affordable if you use our code Spurs15 on screen right now for 15% off. All 48 nations are covered OK jersey as well in preparation for the World Cup. If you want a shirt in the lead up to the World Cup, you can get it in time if you do order now. So use our code Spurs15 for 15% off. Link is in the chat at the moment, or it's on screen. You can see it right there. But look, that's all we got time for right now. We'll see you all again soon. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.